we are heading in the right trajectory, and we have the energy to keep moving forward.
Mayor Bruce Harrell says he's delivered on his campaign promises on homelessness and public safety. His opponent, transit advocate Katie Wilson, says no way.
And I don't think that we've seen the results that we need. Well, good to meet you.
Wilson won nearly 51% of the vote in the August primary, keying in on the mayor's support of a failed proposal she says would have killed social housing.
You know, our current mayor, Harrell, was the face of the campaign to undermine that project.
I've always supported social housing.
The mayor says his efforts to be responsible with city tax dollars have been misrepresented, and he's pushing back against an opponent who's never run for public office.
Greetings from the mayor. She's really not even qualified to do the job. She hasn't had the experiences to do the job.
I've been at the table when legislation was being hashed out, when legislation was being implemented.
Wilson says her 14 years as a leader on transit and progressive taxes have given her the experience Seattle needs. The candidates debate.
The necessity of fighting Trump and protecting our immigrant and refugee communities and other vulnerable communities is exactly why I have grave concerns about the CCTV surveillance legislation, which our mayor supports.
I remind everyone, I was the one that authored the privacy surveillance ordinance. I was the one that authored the bias-free policing. So how rich is it for this person to talk about protecting my community?
It's a grassroots political outsider up against an established city leader for Seattle mayor. Wilson versus Harrell, next on City Inside Out. Welcome to the 23rd season of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. Incumbent Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell is fighting for his political life this November. First-time candidate Katie Wilson, a transit advocate and progressive organizer, won a clear majority in the August primary. She's focused on making Seattle more affordable, but she'll face a big dollar challenge up against Harrell, whose political roots in the city stretch back decades. Now it's up to voters. Will they support Bruce Harrell's years of experience or the new perspectives of Katie Wilson in the race for mayor this fall?
Times change, and I think we're in a moment now where we need a new vision for where this city is headed.
Katie Wilson has never run for office before, but she's bringing a groundswell of voter support to the Seattle mayor's race.
But I'm running for re-election because there is a lot of work to do.
She's up against a well-funded incumbent in Bruce Harrell, a city council member and mayor for nearly 2 decades.
Greetings from the mayor.
I hear your name is Tony Wilson.
Yes, and I hear your name is Katie Wilson.
That's right, that's right.
Wilson, the general secretary of the Transit Riders Union advocacy group, is endorsed by the stranger and earned nearly 51% of the vote in the August primary.
That's a really strong mandate.
The affordability-focused candidate entered the race after Harrell backed a plan to pay for social housing using existing tax dollars instead of a new payroll tax on high earners. Wilson says the mayor's plan, which did not pass, would have doomed the voter-approved housing model from the start.
Our current mayor, Harrell, was the face of the campaign to undermine that project. And if we don't have strong partnership between the mayor's office and the social housing developer, that project could easily fail.
I've always supported social housing.
Harrell, who has since negotiated a $2 million loan for social housing, says he was simply being fiscally prudent.
So we've always supported social housing. The question is, how do we fund it? I have to be concerned about the growth of this city. And if we tax businesses to an extent, they will move out of the city.
Harrell says he's reduced crime and homeless encampments during his term and made major investments in affordable housing. He earned 41% of the primary vote, is endorsed by the Seattle Times, and says his opponent isn't fit to be mayor.
She's really not even qualified to do the job. She hasn't had the experiences to do the job.
Wilson, a transit advocate who helped pass Seattle's jumpstart payroll tax on big businesses, stands by her credentials.
I am an outsider in the sense that I have not been an elected official, but I'm an outsider who comes with an insider's knowledge and experience.
Will Seattle's next mayor be a grassroots challenger or a political veteran?
I think people are really ready for leadership that comes with a vision of what Seattle can be.
The choice is very clear on which way to go to get the city in the right direction. We do not want to go backwards, we want to go forward.
And we are here with both of the candidates who are vying to be your next Seattle mayor, including Mayor Bruce Harrell. Good to see you.
Nice seeing you too.
Also, we have with us Katie Wilson. Katie, good to have you too.
Great to be here.
Well, let's jump into it here. We had a coin flip before the show. Katie, you're going to be speaking first with an opening statement about why you're running, some of your credentials. If you could keep it to a minute, please.
Sure thing. So my name is Katie Wilson, and I'm running for Seattle mayor because I love this city and I want us to do better. I've watched Seattle transform over the years into a place that is just so hard to afford. Housing, childcare, food, groceries, everything is too expensive. I've spent the last 14 years as a coalition builder, winning transformative victories that benefit people across our region every single day. Higher minimum wages, stronger renter protections, better public transit, and progressive revenue to fund the vital public services that we all depend on. I'm running for mayor because we need a city government that is responsive and effective, and right now we are failing. We need real progress on homelessness and on public safety. As I've been talking to voters across the city, we are building the vision of what Seattle can be, a place where you don't need a six-figure income to feel at home, a city with great welcoming public spaces, vibrant neighborhoods, and thriving business districts where people want to socialize and spend their time, a city where we celebrate our diversity and we stand up for our most vulnerable neighbors. Achieving these goals will require vision, leadership, and collaboration. That is why I'm running for mayor. And I would be honored to earn the support of the public.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mayor Harrell, if you wouldn't mind an opening statement about why you're running for re-election, a minute if you could.
Sure, and actually, if I may call you Katie, I agree with her description of the problem. The fact of the matter is, and I'll try to argue with facts, that crime is down across all major categories. The fact of the matter is in 2023, we had over 2,200 people accept shelter referrals, and a similar number in 2024. So despite the challenges we have, Seattle is setting the pace for what a city should do to put people in shelter. The fact of the matter is that under our administration, we spent over $1 billion in affordable housing, realizing the challenges that we have, and we passed a $1 billion levy, $970 million levy to address those issues. We will create 3,000 more units, and most importantly, keep 9,000 people in their homes such that they don't become homeless. I've passed over 1,300 laws protecting the people, not big business, not corporate interests, not special interests. I have a track record and a personal story fighting for these folks. The fact of the matter is while my opponent has ideas, she hasn't done anything. She's arguing about the things that we did when we were on the council and taking credit for those. The fact is she has no experience or training or ability to manage a budget. And what we think the voters will see is that running a major city like Seattle is a big job. And she's advancing some plans like our 4,000 emergency housing or shelter units that just can't be done in how she's describing it. So you'll see the weakness in her platform, just complaints with no solutions, and that's why we're running for re-election, because we have the solutions and we put the city on a trajectory to implement those solutions, and our record speaks for itself.
There's a lot to pull apart. We are going to talk about experience, definitely, when it comes to this discussion here. But I did want to talk about some of the other issues that differentiate you here. And if you wouldn't mind, let's start with social housing here. There's the program that creates permanently affordable housing for people making up to 120% of the area median income. Seattle voters approved this 2 years ago. Earlier this year, there was an election to decide how to fund social housing. Mayor Harrell supported a proposal to use existing tax dollars. That plan was defeated by a measure that enacted a new payroll tax on high earners. Katie, you told me this is why you launched yourself into this race. I want to talk about that, why that's an important differentiator for you.
Absolutely. So, social housing, basically Seattle voters have twice told us now, overwhelmingly, that they want the city to build permanently affordable, publicly owned, mixed income housing, right? Most recently in February with the Prop 1A vote. Bruce, if I might call you Bruce, was the face of the opposition to that campaign, funded by Amazon, Microsoft, and the Chamber of Commerce. It is very important that we get this project right. We have a new social housing developer, there are complicated issues of governance and financing that need to be put together in the right way for this to be successful. People around the country are looking at this experiment in Seattle and seeing whether it's going to be successful or not. We need city leadership that is going to fight to make it work. And Harrell, not just in his support of the opposition campaign, but in other things that he's done over the last couple of years as mayor, has done nothing but try to undermine that project. And it's not going to work unless it has strong collaboration from the mayor's office.
Got it. I know there's a point of contention. Mayor Harrell, how do you respond to that? Your position on social housing?
Again, she's completely wrong. There's been nothing at all to undermine it. We have supported Social Housing Corporation from the beginning. The only issue is how can it be funded? Okay. And for example, she doesn't have a plan on how to fund the 4,000 units she talked about. We wanted it to be funded in the existing payroll expense tax because we need those businesses to stay in Seattle as we're hemorrhaging. When you see businesses out of business downtown Seattle, that hurts us. That's how we fill potholes. That's how we feed the hungry. Mm-hmm. So we supported it. We also had worked out about $800,000 monies toward it such that it could succeed. And then when it passed, worked out a $2 million loan to make sure they do succeed. So we've always been supportive. Their campaign has spread misinformation that we never supported the model. The fact of the matter is this: it is an unproven, untested model. And we believe that it can work and it should work. Not here in Seattle. It hasn't been done. They've had some hiccups, but we've done, my administration has done everything possible to make sure they succeed. There's been no evidence at all that we haven't supported it. And I commit to the voters that we will certainly support it, but we wanted it paid for differently. That was the 1A, 1B discussion.
You wanted it paid for by taking money away from other affordable housing programs.
As you are proposing now in your ability to try to do shelter, that we recognize again, I've had a deficit every year that we have run the city. Mm-hmm. I haven't had a good hand in terms of a budget. At that point, we're looking at a $240 million deficit. So the monies we use, particularly in the payroll expense tax, which, by the way, I hear her taking credit for stuff like minimum wage. She wasn't even in the discussions when we negotiated that.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
So as I was saying is that what we did is we used some of the monies for libraries, for domestic violence investigations. I mean, there's, when you run a city, and again, she has no experience running a budget. When you run a city, you have to make tough decisions for the betterment of the people.
Okay, there's a lot to respond there. Where do you want to start, Katie?
Well, first, just regarding minimum wage, I have never taken credit for Seattle's minimum wage. What I have rightly taken credit for is leading and coordinating campaigns in the cities of Tukwila, unincorporated King County, and Burien to raise the minimum wage to the highest in the country. Let's talk about the city budget, our $8 billion city budget. In 2020, I led on designing and passing the Jumpstart payroll expense tax. And that tax is why we did not have devastating service cuts during the pandemic. And it is what has allowed you to balance the budget for the last 4 years. In 2023, I served on the city's revenue stabilization work group. And we recommended a number of options for progressive revenue, which you failed to pass. And now we are looking at a $250 million budget deficit.
So let's talk about 2020 since she brought this up. In 2020, she said, and I'll quote, "We want to move towards a future entirely without the Seattle Police Department." That's a direct quote from Publicola, a direct quote in November of 2020. You also said earlier that year in your op-ed to Cascade that she was supporting the defunding movement up to 50%. And then in 2023, 2024, she wrote in her solidarity budget, again, a 50% cut in police departments. So we're going to go back in history. Let's have an accurate record of what she stood for. Now, the fact of the matter is that she's flip-flopping on her positions on public safety, among other things. Our record in housing, as demonstrated today when we issued a $350 million announcement on housing, is our administration has led unprecedented numbers in investments toward housing, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. I want to make sure that you can respond to another piece that the mayor said there, please.
Sure. Well, I mean, let's just move forward and talk about policing and public safety, right? I've been talking with people around the city, and the fact is that people do not feel safe. Crime is starting to fall, which is really good, but if you look at the data nationally in Seattle, what's happening is that it's going down to kind of its pre-pandemic mean. So there was a big spike during the pandemic. It's starting to come down, but it's actually come down more slowly in Seattle than in other cities around the country. We had a spike when other cities were falling during your tenure. And it's not hard to understand why that happened. You hired and stood by Adrian Diaz, as police chief. And under his reign, SPD lost many high-integrity career officers. Morale tanked. So we've had a dysfunctional police department, and as I'm talking to people in neighborhoods around the city, especially in some of our crime hotspots downtown in Little Saigon, the police have actually, it's weird to be the one saying this in this race, but the police actually have a really important role to play that's not happening right now, right? We have outreach teams which are going out doing proactive outreach, which is what needs to happen. But the police have a role in being a visible, constant presence that is helping to enforce norms of behavior and that's allowing those outreach teams to do their work. And right now, that is not happening. So we have a lot of work to do to improve public safety, and I'm committed to doing that.
Well, it's pretty rich for her to say this when I said a direct quote that we want to move towards a future entirely without SPD.
Let's hash this out. What's going on?
I never said
you did
that.
say that,
I
and
didn't
we
say
will
that.
produce that after this debate.
Okay.
You also wrote an op-ed where you totally articulated the defunding of the police. And in your solidarity budget, you clearly articulated a 50% reduction in the police's budget. Now let's go to the Diaz. Here's one of the challenges you have. And she's never led anything. Number one, just look at her. Just look at her background. I mean, she's run a nonprofit of, I think, one employee. An executive has to make some tough decisions. Sometimes this could be reprimanding an employee, terminating an employee. And when you run an organization of 14,000 employees, you have to make these tough decisions. That's why the stakes are so high when in this particular election, because you are literally hiring a person. If you look at her, she doesn't talk much about her personal story, by the way.
Well, and we'll talk about that. But I think there's a question about Diaz.
There's no ability to lead an organization, no budget. What's the highest budget you've ever managed? I'm asking, what's the highest budget you've ever managed?
I've managed the Transit Riders Union budget.
What's the dollar amount?
About $200,000 a year.
That's the highest budget you've ever run. Is $200,000. How many employees did it have?
The size of the Transit Riders Union is not reflected in its number of paid employees. It's reflected in the hundreds of dues-paying members who come and who do work every day for the organization because they believe in it, not because they're being paid to do that work. I have spent my career building and managing large multi-partner coalitions composed of dozens of organizations, many, many staff, and paid and unpaid volunteers. And my work has been managing those coalitions, keeping them oriented toward a common goal, and achieving major victories.
How many employees have you managed?
I think
Yeah.
we've.
That's the fair question, isn't it?
Sure, it is.
Is that a fair question?
I think it sounded like there were.
How many employees have you managed?
The Transit Riders Union has had several paid employees, and again,
but in your tax return for the TRU, they had no paid employees. So
what you mean, like back when we were an all-volunteer organization and I was working more than full-time to build that organization?
Yeah, I feel like
in
we
a
can.
city of 800,000 people with 14,000 employees, I think it's fair to know if you've ever managed any employees, because you brought up the issue. You brought up the issue with Adrian Diaz, who was the chief of police, that I had to terminate. You brought it up, and what I'm trying to press upon everyone that's listening is that an executive has to have executive experience. Even before this, I was elected to the city council as president twice. Okay. I was a managing partner at a law firm.
Okay.
I know how to manage people. I don't have any complaints against me. We try to be fairly, but these are tough decisions, Katie. And if you've never managed any employees, you should at least tell maybe they'd accept that. The city of Seattle, I'm hoping to be the mayor of a $8 billion organization, and I've never managed any employees.
Okay, I don't know if I would like for you to talk about your experience, which I think we've touched on.
Yes.
You've heard what the mayor has been saying to you. How do you want to respond to that when it comes to managing employees, or wherever you want to go with that?
I mean, I'll say that the job of mayor is about assembling and managing a team of people with integrity, people of competence, keeping them oriented toward a common vision, and keeping them motivated. And that is exactly the work that I've been doing my entire career. And I think what we have seen in the last 4 years under you, Bruce, is a demonstrated failure to do that effectively. Okay, it's not just Diaz. You hired your high school buddy to lead the KCRHA at a very sensitive time for that organization, and that was a disaster, and he had to resign. You hired an external affairs coordinator that resigned under allegations of sexual assault. And if you have one bad hire, that's one thing. But when that becomes a pattern, at some point you have to begin to question the judgment of the person who is assembling that team.
There's a direct piece there, and then I need to move on to endorsements, please.
Let me also say, You referred to a person as a high school buddy. He did go to high school with me. He's also a Harvard MBA and a CPA as well. It's a challenging job. And again, if you actually had experience of hiring people, which clearly you do not, you realize that sometimes you get it right and sometimes you can make corrections and you have to be nimble. And what you don't do, you don't blame colleagues on your left and right and say, you know, you could have done better. You hire people based on their experience and their resume, but you will not always get it right. And again, the city needs to understand this. You're talking about going back into a bad situation. And we've seen mayors that do not know how to manage staffs. I have an exemplary executive team and department heads and cabinets. Bar none, I've done national searches for the kind of talent we have recruited. And we recruited them successfully because they like working for my administration.
Good. Thank you. I want to make sure that we get to some of the endorsements that are going on here. Katie, let me talk to you. As of mid-September, your campaign has raised about $770,000. I want to talk about your top 3 endorsements and what you think that should mean to viewers out there.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we have been sole endorsed by every single Democrat Party organization in this city. And I think that is really significant, given that I'm a first-time candidate running against an incumbent who's been in office for 16 of the last 18 years. I think that is a reflection on my opponent's record. I've been endorsed also by Protect 17, which is the largest union of city employees. That is thousands of city workers saying that they do not have confidence in their current boss, and they do have confidence in my leadership. And finally, I'm proud to be endorsed by UFCW 3000, which is the largest private sector union in our state.
Grocery store workers.
Grocery workers, our hardworking grocery workers.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Mayor Harrell, I'll go this question to you here. As of mid-September, your campaign has raised more than $833,000. I want to talk about your top 3 endorsements and what voters should draw from that.
Yeah, I'd first ask people to just go to my endorsement page and you'll see the who's who in the Democrat Party and mayors throughout the country, not just locally, the whole region. If I were to narrow down the first 3, I'd say, of course, the largest labor organization, the Martin Luther King Labor Council, who sole endorsed my candidacy. I'd also look at Representative Pramila Jayapal, who I think we all could agree is the most progressive Democratic leader that we have in the state. And then I would also mention that we have the governor, Bob Ferguson's sole endorsement, which is critical as we fight Trump. And I think all of these leaders that I just mentioned, both in labor and in politics, recognize that I'm the one to fight against Trump. That, again, I have an opponent that has no experience in constitutional law, in arguing in front of courts, to be able to protect the people that matter most, which in this case is immigrant and refugees, people of color, underrepresented groups. And that's why she doesn't talk a lot about her personal story, because, you know, I wasn't born of privilege. I was born here as an underdog, as a fighter, and that's exactly what the people of Seattle need right now.
I want to talk about, please, Katie.
Well, on that note, I just wanted to mention that the necessity of fighting Trump and protecting our immigrant and refugee communities and other vulnerable communities is exactly why I have grave concerns about the CCTV surveillance legislation, which our mayor supports and has transmitted to council. Because that proposal is to greatly increase the cameras around our city at a very sensitive time when we've already seen when federal agents went into Washington, D.C., they took control of that city's real-time crime center, and they immediately had access to all of the surveillance technology. And this legislation that Mayor Harrell has proposed is opposed by immigrants' rights groups, by civil rights, civil liberty groups, and by the city's own surveillance advisory working group.
Yeah.
Please.
Once again, speaking on behalf of minorities, she completely ignores what Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth said yesterday, what Councilmember Deborah Juarez said yesterday. And she ignored people that were around me, people of color and people from the immigrants and refugees communities who are asking me for tools to become safe. Now, we will address all of the concerns about federal overreach, the misuse of surveillance. I remind everyone, I was the one that authored the privacy surveillance ordinance. I was the one that authored the bias-free policing. So how rich is it for this person to talk about protecting my community? My mother was interned through an executive order. This is very personal. I will never allow my community to be over-surveilled by government technology. We put the safeguards are in place based on legislation we put in safe, and I will issue another executive order to assure those people that have concerns that their issues are addressed.
I appreciate the good intentions and the executive order, but we have already seen the Washington Department of Licensing and the Washington Healthcare Authority their personal data they have collected has gone to the Trump administration despite assurances from the state government that that would not happen. So with respect, I do not have the confidence that this increase in surveillance will not allow the federal government to have access to people's sensitive personal data and whereabouts.
They will not. The law does not allow them to do that. And we ran into these same we ran into the same arguments when I proposed body cameras. Body cameras are put for the protection of communities of color. Now, this surveillance will be used smartly and not to the detriment of the very same people that my opponent seems to want to speak on their behalf, because, again, we met, listen to Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth's passionate plea to support this kind of technology. So what we don't want to see are people speaking for other communities. Okay. And the communities that want to be safe are supporting what we're trying to do.
Fair enough. I do want to make sure I talk about some plans for homelessness. I've got about a minute to break this down, but I know you're talking about adding some things in terms of shelter beds. Let's talk about that and how are you going to pay for it, too?
Yeah, great question. And, what we've seen over the last 4 years is that Seattle has lost shelter capacity every single year that Mayor Harrell has been in office. We have more people sleeping unsheltered on our street than we did 4 years ago. We have 2 homeless people for every shelter bed. Like, the numbers don't lie. And this contributes to our public safety problems, too, right? Because the mayor's policy of removing encampments, sweeping people around without actually providing the shelter and the support that people need to be successful there, destabilizes people, right? And especially when people are struggling with substance use disorder and mental illness, right? It means that they're more likely to contribute to our public safety problems. And we are seeing that. I've been around the city talking with people in various business districts, neighborhoods. We are seeing this. So the fact is that also means that we are spending our money inefficiently, ineffectively, because instead of creating those realistic pathways to shelter and housing with supportive services, we have a system of dead ends, right? We have people coming out of Harborview being discharged onto the streets. And we have people that the Metro Transit Police engage.
In terms of your plan and how you pay for it. Sure.
So we absolutely need to be opening more emergency housing and shelter.
What cost is your proposal, Katie?
And I will say that I saw the press release you put out, with a very long
question. What cost is your proposal?
We are both going to need the existing revenue that we are using to be used more efficiently, and we are going to need additional revenue. And that is going to be a combination of raising more revenue here in Seattle locally, and it's also going to be partnering with the county and partnering with the state.
We're joined on this before closing comments, please.
You won't ask the question, what cost does your proposal have? What will it cost the city?
It's going to require more revenue. I don't know exactly how much, okay?
So you propose a plan and you don't know how much it's going to cost. We could establish that. And then number 2, what progressive revenue will you increase in your first year to
Definitely a local capital gains tax is absolutely something that
How much would that generate?
It depends on how high it is. Probably around 15 to 25 million per increment of 0.1%.
Your cost is around 500 million.
That is absolutely not true. And the press release that you put out was ridiculous.
No, we have the data to suggest why your plan is ridiculous, because you can't pay for it. So
the press
tell the
release
voters
that you put
how
out
much. Tell the voters how much your plan will cost.
Wherever you want to go with this.
She can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this goes into her platform. She puts the platitudes out there, but there is no plan, and the voters need to know.
It sounds to me like Harrell's slogan for this campaign is "We can't do better."
No, we can do better, but we could do a lot worse, too, as evidenced by a person that gives ideas but cannot make the difficult decision of saying how much it's going to cost. I will ask you again, how much will your plan cost?
There are a number of pieces to this. There are a number of pieces to this. And I am promising 4,000, and I will say that the more meaningful metric is the number of unsheltered homeless people on our streets. And we have seen that number go up and up and up. And we need to begin to bring that number down.
How much will your plan cost?
There are different elements to it. And if you want to spend half an hour with me going through the different elements, okay, because there is what are we going to do with all the empty studio apartments in our affordable housing sector? That is because we have incorrectly emphasized building studio apartments and maximizing units instead of building the housing that people need, right? So we can buy rent down in some of those studio apartments. And that is one section of it, okay? And then we also need to be expanding tiny house villages instead of putting impediments in their way. That is another part to it. So there are a lot of pieces to this, and we can spend a long time talking about costs and talking about strategies, but we have very little time here.
Thank you. And I do need to wrap up here. A closing statement, if you wouldn't mind, Katie.
Sure. So as you probably know, I did very well in the primary election. I received over 50% of the vote as a first-time candidate with very little institutional support, challenging a longtime incumbent. And a lot of people who were not paying close attention to this race suddenly began taking it very seriously. And I think many people who don't know me and hadn't been following my work over the years suddenly began asking, who is this person who looks like she might be our next mayor? So I may be an outsider, but I have an insider's knowledge and experience of City Hall. I've been at the table when legislation is hashed out, when programs are designed, and when policies are implemented. I've seen how City Hall works and how it often fails to work for us. The job of the mayor is about leadership. It's about assembling a team of people who have the highest competence and integrity, keeping them oriented and motivated around a common vision for our city's future. And that is exactly what I have spent my career doing. In my many years of organizing and the last 6 months on this campaign, I've met so many brilliant people who care so deeply about this city and its future. Politics should not be purely transactional. It's about building relationships, and it's about finding common ground. That is the spirit that I intend to bring into the mayor's office.
Thank you very much. A minute, if you could, Mayor Harrell.
Yes, thank you. What this race is going to boil down to is a person that, number one, has a proven track record, that's not afraid to answer the tough questions. When you ask me how much something is going to cost, I'm going to research it and try to give you a good answer. I'm not going to dodge it. The fact of the matter is that she has no experience, and it's a scary proposition. When I said, she said, we want to move towards a future entirely without SBD, and then she starts talking about the need for public safety, it is a hypocritical statement to start saying that when she, and again, she proposed in her solidarity budget at least a 50% cut to the police department. It's scary for me as a person who was born in this city to see a person with this lack of experience to take such a tough job. Now, I'll be the first to say that there's a lot of work to do. I mean, I was dealt a very tough hand, a budget deficit every single year, people living on the streets, trying to shelter people. The fact is that 70% of the people that are unhoused in Seattle did not become unhoused in Seattle. But we will step up, because we always do. And when the general voters actually look at brand A or brand B, they'll see the difference in our platforms. They'll see a person that gives platitudes that will not answer a question.
Okay, thank you both very much for this, and we will be right back. What are people saying on social media about the race for Seattle mayor? One person writes, Harrell wins easily. It's an easy decision based on great improvements to the city the last couple of years. Why would we break the momentum we have going? Another comments, most of Wilson's ideas are vastly better than what is currently there and will help create in Seattle a more dense and transit-rich city, which will improve the quality of life for all. We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on social media. Good to have that input. Katie Wilson, Mayor Bruce Harrell, great to have you both, and we will see you next time on City Inside Out.